It started like any other Saturday morning in Brookhaven, a quiet New England town where the loudest thing was usually the sound of turning book pages. But at 9:47 a.m., inside the historic town library, a decorated K-9 unit named Rex refused to move past the reading room. Rex was trained to detect everything from narcotics to explosives. But that day, it wasn't drugs. It wasn't danger. It was something deeper, something older. His handler, Officer Rachel Quinn, thought it was a malfunction. Maybe a squirrel or a strange scent from the boiler room. But Rex wouldn't budge. His growl was low, constant. He was staring at the trapdoor beneath the librarian's desk. And that's when everything changed. It was just past 8 a.m. when the first patrons began trickling into the Crestwood Public Library. The morning was quiet, as usual. Sunlight filtered through the tall windows, painting pale yellow stripes across the wood floor. Outside, the town stirred gently, coffee shops opening, high schoolers yawning their way to the bus stop, and elderly couples starting their habitual morning walks. Inside the library, the atmosphere was hushed and warm. Rows of worn books lined the shelves, the smell of paper and oak mingling in the air. And sitting quietly by the front desk, panting lightly, was K-9 Officer Bear. Bear was a seasoned German shepherd with years in the field. His handler, Officer Mia Ramirez, had brought him along for what was supposed to be a low-key presentation about K-9 units for the local school group. No threats, no patrols, just a visit. But Bear wasn't calm. Not today. Mia first noticed it the moment they stepped through the front doors. Bear's ears pricked, his body stiffened, his eyes, usually scanning slowly, locked on a single point, the far corner of the library. He let out a low, almost inaudible growl. "Easy, buddy," Mia murmured, giving the leash a gentle tug. Bear didn't respond. He took a single step forward, nose flaring. His gaze was fixed on the floor near the back wall, where a heavy iron door led to the library's long-abandoned basement. Few people even remembered it was there. "Mia," came the soft voice of Evelyn Porter, the elderly librarian who'd run the place for more than 40 years. "Is something wrong?" Mia gave her a polite smile, though her fingers tensed around the leash. "He's just alert. Probably smells an old rodent or something." But even as she said it, she knew that wasn't true. Bear's stance had shifted from curious to protective. His fur bristled, and he emitted another growl. Deeper this time. A boy near the kids' reading section glanced up nervously. Bear didn't bark, not yet, but he was warning. Mia crouched beside him, her hand resting gently on his side. "What do you smell, Bear?" she whispered. The basement door creaked. No one had touched it. No one was near it. It was subtle, barely a shift, but the noise was real. Mia stood slowly, now fully alert. She scanned the quiet library. A couple of students typed on laptops. Oblivious. Evelyn looked confused, her eyes flicking from Mia to Bear. "The door," Mia said, pointing. "Has anyone been down there recently?" Evelyn shook her head. "Not in years. We keep it locked. Water damage in the lower levels, unsafe." Mia stepped toward the door. Bear close at her side. He moved like a shadow now, silent, focused. When they reached it, she tested the handle. It turned, unlocked. "Was this supposed to be open?" Mia asked, glancing at Evelyn. The librarian's face paled. "Absolutely not. Mia, I swear I locked it myself. No one's been down there. No one should be able to." Bear erupted in a bark. Loud, deep, piercing. The entire library fell silent. Pages stopped turning. Fingers froze on keyboards. Even Evelyn gasped, backing away. Bear lunged forward, paws striking the basement door with a force that rattled it on its hinges. The bark continued, sharp, demanding, as if trying to speak words no one could hear. Mia unclipped his leash. "Go," she whispered. Bear didn't hesitate. He shoved the door open with his shoulder and vanished into the darkness below. Mia turned to Evelyn. "Call dispatch. Tell them Officer Ramirez is requesting backup at Crestwood Library. Potential 10 to 90. And Evelyn," the older woman looked up, visibly trembling. "Tell them the K-9 has made contact with something. And he's not letting go." Down below, Bear barked again. But this time, there was an answer. A sound that didn't belong in an empty basement. Something moved. It had been nearly a decade since anyone had touched the basement door of the old Brookridge Public Library. renovated from a 1904 courthouse. The building stood tall with its arched windows and creaking wooden floors. Locals loved its charm. Children came for storytime. Teens gathered to study. Elderly folks dozed off in the reading room. But no one ever went near the basement. Officer Clara Wu stared at the heavy metal door, her flashlight casting a cold halo across the rusted hinges. Shadow, her K9 partner, had stopped barking, but his nose was now glued to the floor, his body taut with tension. He let out a low growl, more a vibration than sound. His eyes locked on the door like it had whispered his name. Shadow. Heel, Clara murmured, instinctively, though her voice betrayed unease. The dog didn't flinch. The librarian, Ms. Evelyn Harrow, clutched her cardigan tighter as she stood behind Clara. I told you, she whispered. He started barking the second he passed that spot. I've worked here for 15 years. I've never seen a dog react like that, ever. Clara nodded slowly. You said the basement hasn't been opened in years? Not since the remodel. They locked it up, said it wasn't safe. Evelyn's eyes flicked to the old security camera above the door. Even maintenance avoids it. They say the lights flicker when they get near it. Clara knelt beside Shadow, placing a steadying hand on his back. She could feel the tremor beneath his thick fur, the way his muscles coiled as if ready to spring. Then she noticed it, barely visible against the dusty floorboards, a small, curved scratch right beneath the door. Faint, shallow, recent. She traced it with a gloved finger. This wasn't here last week, she muttered. Ms. Harrow's face paled. How can you tell? Because I was here last Thursday. I helped a kid who got his head stuck in the book return slot. Clara said, almost managing a smile. And I stood right here. This scratch is fresh. Shadow barked again. A single, piercing sound that bounced off the tall bookcases like a gunshot. Several patrons peeked nervously from behind reading nooks. Clara waved them off. I'm calling this in, she said, rising. We need backup, and a key to this door. I don't have one, Evelyn replied, shaking her head. Only the city archives does. I can try. But Clara was already speaking into her radio. Dispatch. This is Unit 7. I need a secondary unit at Brookridge Library. Possible forced entry or disturbance in the basement area. K9 is reacting to unknown stimulus behind sealed door. Requesting assistance and building access protocol. The static crackled. Copy that. Unit 7. Sending Officer Colter and Maintenance Supervisor your way. ETA 10 minutes. Shadow's head snapped left. Clara followed his gaze. Down the hall, a light flickered. It wasn't the fluorescent kind of flicker. It was slower, deliberate, like something, or someone, was testing the power. Or watching. Evelyn's voice was barely audible. They say strange things started happening down there right after the building was remodeled. People blamed wiring, but lights, books falling off shelves, the sound of furniture scraping. Except no one was there. Clara looked back at Shadow, who now stood still as stone. Tail stiff, ears pinned back. His growl had faded, but the warning was clear. Something wasn't right, and it was behind that door. Don't let anyone leave the building, Clara told Evelyn, stepping back as she eyed the basement entrance. Whatever's down there, we're not letting it walk out. And Shadow, as if in response, took one quiet step closer to the door, nose twitching, ready to face the darkness beneath the silence. The silence in the old library grew heavier with every bark Shadow let out. Officer Colter's hand tightened on the leash. Knuckles white. What is it, boy? He asked, his voice a low whisper. Like he didn't want to disturb the wrong thing. Shadow didn't answer with more barking this time, just a growl. Low, long, rumbling. His nose was pointed at a thick metal door tucked behind an outdated archives sign and a row of dusty encyclopedias. Clara Wu stepped forward, flashlight beam catching the dust dancing in the air. She traced her hand along the edge of the doorframe. This door wasn't on the building plans. She muttered. You sure? Colter asked. Positive. I pulled the original layout from city records last month for the grant inspection. This section wasn't supposed to exist. Shadow pressed his head against the seam of the door and gave a single whine. They both paused. There was something primal in that sound. Less urgency now. More sorrow? Colter knelt beside Shadow and pressed his palm against the cold steel. It's locked, he said. No knob, no keypad. Just a damn reinforced slab of metal in a building meant for children's books and summer reading contests. I'm calling this in, Clara said, already pulling out her phone. But Colter's instincts were screaming. Hold on, we're not kicking down anything yet. Clara glanced at him. You think this could be some kind of bunker? Maybe leftover from Cold War days? Or maybe something someone didn't want found? Shadow backed away from the door suddenly and walked in a small circle. Tail stiff, head low. Then he sat, body tense, eyes never leaving the door. A pause. Then, thud. Both of them jumped. The sound had come from the other side of the door. Colter drew his weapon instantly. Clara gasped and stepped back. Did you hear that? He whispered. Yeah, it wasn't just a noise. That was movement. Someone, or something, is down there. They froze again. Another sound came, faint, but unmistakable, 3 quick knocks. Tap, tap, tap. Shadow's ears went straight up. He stood and walked to the wall beside the door, sniffing furiously. Then he turned to Clara and barked twice. Sharp and purposeful. He's saying it again, she whispered. Whatever's behind there, it's not just bones. Colter hit the radio. Dispatch. This is Officer Colter. I need backup and building permits on file for East Pine Library. We've got a sealed, unauthorized space under the foundation. Copy that, officer. Units en route. Shadow's hackles were up again. But this time, his tail was down, not in fear, but submission, like he sensed someone behind that door who needed help. A child? A survivor? Or something else entirely? Shadow's not usually wrong, Colter said, looking at Clara. And this isn't some ghost story. I know, Clara murmured, her hand trembling as she reached out to touch the door again. But something about this place feels wrong. Like it was meant to be forgotten. Behind them, the library's old fluorescent lights flickered once. Then again. Then shut off completely. Pitch darkness swallowed them whole. Only Shadow's low growl echoed in the blackness. A second later, Clara's flashlight flicked back on, its narrow beam cutting through the darkness like a scalpel. That wasn't just a power surge, she said, her voice a whisper. That was deliberate. Colter clicked his radio again. Dispatch. We've lost lights in the Pine Library basement. Possible tampering. ETA on backup? A moment of static. Then, 10 minutes out. Colter muttered a curse under his breath. 10 minutes in this place is an eternity. Shadow stood like a statue. His eyes locked on the metal door. His breathing was low, steady. The tension in the room wasn't just fear, it was anticipation. As if the air itself was holding its breath. Clara moved carefully along the wall beside the door, sweeping her flashlight over old shelving units and concrete pillars. Her light stopped at a dusty breaker panel mounted behind an overturned cart of microfiche readers. She pushed the cart aside with a grunt and popped the panel open. Every switch was flipped up. It's not the breaker, she said. Someone cut the power manually, probably from somewhere else in the building. Colter turned to Shadow. Show me, he said softly. The dog didn't hesitate. He turned, trotted back through the narrow corridor toward the stairs, but stopped at a side hallway. One Clara hadn't even noticed before. It was narrower, half blocked by an old filing cabinet that looked like it hadn't been touched in decades. Colter shoved it aside. Behind the cabinet was a door. Old, warped wood with peeling paint and a brass knob that looked like it hadn't turned since the Carter administration. No mention of this either? Colter asked. Clara shook her head, squinting at the doorframe. Not on any of the blueprints I saw. Colter glanced back toward the thick metal door they'd left behind. Feels like someone didn't want anyone to know how to get to what's behind there. He tried the knob. Locked. Clara knelt, reached into her bag, and pulled out a small toolkit. I did grad work cataloging old archive rooms. You'd be surprised how often janitors lock things and lose the keys. She inserted a small pick. Jiggled gently. Click. The door creaked open slowly. Shadow didn't bark, but his body tensed. They stepped into a narrow passage. Colder than the library above. The walls were concrete. The floor sloped, and the air smelled faintly of mildew, dust, and something else. Something sour. The beam of Clara's flashlight illuminated faded posters peeling off the walls, children's reading slogans. Long outdated. Read to grow, and knowledge is power. But there was something else, scrawled in faint red chalk over the posters. as if drawn by a child's hand. "I want out." The words were uneven, desperate, repeated 3 times down the wall. Colter felt a shiver run down his back. "Who wrote that?" Clara whispered, tracing her fingers across one line. Shadow growled again, this time with a low, urgent tone. They reached a second metal door, this one smaller. Old-fashioned, like it had been repurposed from some other building. On the ground was a hatch. A square plate with a rusted handle. Clara hesitated. "It's a sub-basement?" Colter knelt beside it. "This library doesn't have a sub-basement." "Well," she said, her voice brittle, "clearly it does." Shadow's nose was pressed to the hatch now. Tail stiff, head angled low. And then, faintly, they heard it. A sound. Not metal. Not creaking pipes or a scurrying rat. It was a voice. A muffled voice. Weak. Calling out through layers of dust. Concrete. And time. "Please." Clara's flashlight trembled in her hand. Colter's voice dropped to a whisper. "There's someone down there." Shadow barked once, short. Sharp. Certain. Colter looked up. Face pale but resolute. "We're not waiting for backup." He grabbed the rusted handle and pulled. With a loud groan, the hatch creaked open, revealing a narrow stairwell that vanished into darkness. The cold air that poured up smelled of old earth and grief. Colter looked at Clara. "Stay here if you want." But she was already reaching for her second flashlight. "Not a chance." Shadow stepped forward, tail high, and began the descent into the dark unknown. The stairs groaned under their weight as Colter and Clara followed closely behind Shadow, who descended with slow, deliberate steps. Each footfall echoed off the damp concrete walls, swallowed quickly by the darkness ahead. The deeper they went, the colder it became. Not the kind of cold from winter air, but colder. Older kind. The kind that lingered in places forgotten by the sun. At the bottom, Colter's boots landed in a thin layer of dust and grit. The space opened into a wide room. Not on any blueprint. The walls were raw concrete. Cracked in places. Broken shelves lined one side. And on the far wall, Clara's flashlight beam stopped on something jarring. An old cot. Rusted. Torn. A moldy blanket balled up in one corner. Clara moved closer. "This looks like a holding room." Colter swept his light across the floor. Scratches. Dozens of them. Like someone had clawed at the concrete. Desperate. Deliberate. Shadow growled low. On the wall behind the cot was more chalk writing. Smeared by time and fingers. "No one hears. No one helps." Clara's voice was barely a whisper. Someone was kept down here. They turned another corner. A second chamber, smaller. Windowless. Crude wooden doors built into the wall like lockers. But taller. Deeper. Colter hesitated, then opened one. Inside was a child's chair. Broken crayons on the floor. A torn book. The Velveteen Rabbit, its pages damp and mold-stained. And then they heard it again. Faint. Trembling. Tap. 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 It came from the far wall. 3 short knocks. A pause. Then again. Shadow lunged forward, barking, loud now, sharp, and filled with urgency. "Hello?" Colter shouted. "This is law enforcement. Can you hear me?" Silence. Then, just beneath the sound of Shadow's growls, came a voice. Weak, barely audible. "Help, down here, please." Colter didn't wait. He ran to the wall where the sound came from. It looked solid, just concrete blocks and grime. But Clara spotted it first, a seam. Faint, but unmistakable. A hidden door. She pressed her hand to the center. "Colter, there's a draft. This opens." "No knob. No lock," he muttered. "Could be magnetic or hidden trigger." Shadow stood to the side now, pawing the floor. Dust scattered, revealing a recessed panel in the wall. Clara pressed it. A hiss of old air escaped as the panel gave way. Slowly, a square section of wall creaked inward. The air that rushed out was foul, moist, metallic, and sharp. And worse, silent. Their flashlights pierced through the black void, revealing a third room. And there, lying on the floor, was a girl. Small, thin, curled into herself like a wounded bird. A tangle of unwashed hair covered her face. Her wrists were bound with fabric strips. Her eyes blinked against the light, wide and terrified. Clara gasped. "Oh my God, Colter." The detective was already beside her, untying the makeshift bindings. "It's okay," he said, voice steady. "You're safe now. We've got you." The girl didn't speak. Her lips were chapped, her skin pale and bruised. But she reached, trembling, for the dog. Shadow lowered his head, gently pressing his muzzle to her hand. She let out a sound, not quite a cry, but the sound of someone remembering hope. "We need medics," Colter said into the radio. "We found someone alive." Clara wrapped the girl in her jacket as Shadow lay beside her. Refusing to move, Colter looked around the chamber. A mattress, empty food cans, a locked crate, and drawn in the dust. Over and over, the same words, "Don't forget me." He stood slowly, rage rising in his chest. Someone had built this. Someone meant for it to stay hidden. And someone had nearly gotten away with it, until a retired K-9 had refused to leave a quiet, empty building. Until Shadow barked at a forgotten door. Until now. The paramedics arrived fast. The girl, no older than 9, was wheeled out on a stretcher. Eyes locked on Shadow until the very last moment. She hadn't said a word since they found her. Just clung to Clara's sleeve with fingers like dry leaves. As if letting go meant falling back into the dark. Shadow sat by the ambulance until its doors closed. His tail still, ears high, nose twitching with tension. Then he looked back toward the library, toward the basement they'd just left. Clara noticed. He's not done. Neither was Colter. They returned inside, pushing deeper into the rooms behind the hidden wall. The place was bigger than they'd thought, an entire wing buried under the foundation. No permits, no construction records, just empty space that shouldn't exist. Clara found the crate they'd seen earlier, padlocked. Thick chains wrapping it like it held something sacred. Or dangerous. Colter didn't hesitate. "Daniels," he barked into his radio. "Bring the bolt cutters. And gloves." When Daniels arrived, he stared at the crate. "What's even in there?" "That's what we're about to find out," Colter said grimly. With a crack and a snap, the padlock gave. Colter swung the lid open, and froze. Inside was a stack of manila folders, brittle with age, and a dusty laptop sealed in plastic wrap. On top of the pile lay an old Polaroid photograph. A girl, about 15, bruised, tied to a chair in what looked like a different room. The walls lined with books, like the basement they stood in now. On the back, someone had written in blue ink, "Subject 7, non-compliant, re-education failed." Clara's hands shook. "What the hell is this?" Colter flipped through the folders. Each one had a name, a photo, a number, dozens of them. Some were marked, released. Others, transferred. Many just said, terminated. Shadow whined, a soft, unsettled sound. He stood at the back wall now, staring at a section where the concrete looked cleaner, newer. Colter walked over. "You smell something?" Shadow gave a low bark. Not loud, just final. Clara joined him. "Colter, this wall isn't part of the original structure. Look at the seams, fresh cement." Colter put his ear to it. Tap, tap, tap. A muffled knock. 3 short beats. Then silence. No one spoke. The air in the room turned heavy. Colter stepped back. "Get the sledge." Daniels returned moments later. The first swing cracked the cement. The second sent a tremor up the wall. By the fourth, a square of plaster caved in, revealing something neither of them expected. A metal door, painted the same color as the wall. Reinforced, locked tight. A keypad blinked red beside the handle. Clara stared. This isn't just some creep's hideaway. This is military grade. Institutional. Or someone with money and secrets. Colter muttered. Shadow barked again, then sat down, staring at the keypad like it had the answers. They didn't have a code. But they had a laptop. Colter turned to Daniels. "Get this powered up. Pull the hard drive if you have to. There's something behind this door." "Something worse?" Clara asked, not wanting the answer. Colter didn't respond. His eyes were fixed on the blinking red light. The kind that warned you, not everything should be found. The laptop hissed to life. Its fan wheezing like lungs drawing first breath in decades. Daniels crouched on the dusty floor beside it, his fingers flying across the keys. "This thing's ancient," he muttered. "Windows XP. No password, lucky us." Clara knelt beside him, her flashlight casting long shadows over the cracked floor. Shadow stood alert nearby, watching the metal door like it might breathe. Daniels opened the first folder on the desktop. A single word, Artemis. Inside, scanned documents, handwritten notes, and dozens of audio logs labeled only by date. He clicked one at random. A voice crackled through the speakers. Male. Calm. Measured. Subject 12 resisted sedation. Screamed the entire time. Dr. Leckler has adjusted the schedule. We'll continue phase 3 tomorrow. Another file. We've relocated operations beneath the central archive. Soundproofing has held. Shadow activity increased. Recommend further canine deterrence. Clara felt bile rise in her throat. What were they doing down here? Daniels opened a photo, a stark room, lit by a single bulb. In the center, a small desk, a single chair, and a child, no older than 10, hands folded neatly on her lap. Eyes vacant. Something in the corner of the frame twitched. Clara leaned in. Pause that, she whispered. There, barely visible. A marking on the back wall. Etched like it had been scratched in. She enhanced the image. 4 digits. 7419. Colter stood behind them, silent. Then he turned toward the metal door. The keypad still blinked red. Without a word, he punched in the code, 7419. The light turned green. A deep, mechanical click echoed in the chamber. Shadow growled low. Colter drew his weapon. Stay behind me. The door creaked open, revealing a narrow hallway beyond, lit only by flickering emergency lights. The air that flowed out was different, cold, sterile, and tinged with something faintly chemical. Something wrong. They stepped through. The walls were lined with one-way mirrors, at least. That's what they looked like. On the far end, a glass panel overlooked a concrete room with a single chair bolted to the floor. And on the walls? Photographs. Hundreds of them. Children's faces. Some smiling, some not. Each one labeled. Each one catalogued. Clara's voice cracked. Why here? Why under a library? Daniels whispered. Because no one would think to look. In the center of the room, Shadow suddenly stopped. His ears shot up. He let out a single bark, then turned to a corner that looked like a blank wall. Another bark, this one sharper. Colter tapped the wall. Hollow. He shoved against it. Nothing. Clara joined, running her fingers along the seams. Her flashlight caught something, a tiny latch, nearly invisible. She pressed it. The panel slid open with a soft hiss. And inside, curled in the fetal position under a tattered blanket, was another child, eyes wide, unblinking, silent. A girl. She looked no older than 6. Shadow whimpered and stepped forward slowly. His tail low, his body still. The girl didn't flinch. She looked at the dog, then at Clara, and whispered. Are you the real ones, or just part of the dream? Clara dropped to her knees. Reaching out. You're safe now. We're real, I promise. Behind her, Colter's jaw clenched. How many more? He whispered. Clara didn't answer. Because deep down, they all knew. This wasn't the end. It was only the door. The girl, pale, fragile, curled into Clara's arms without a sound. Her name, barely audible. Mira. No last name. No record. Just one child among many whose story was buried under bookshelves and bureaucracy. Colter called it in, voice low and flat. We've recovered a minor, female. Approximately 6. Responsive but traumatized. We're going to need medics. And backup. As the echo of his voice faded through the radio, Shadow remained by Myra's side. His body coiled like a sentinel. He didn't bark now. He didn't growl. He simply watched the hallway like something else might come crawling out of the dark. And it did. From a door at the far end, just past the mirrored chamber, came the sound of footsteps. Calm, slow, deliberate. Clara rose and aimed her flashlight and her sidearm. A figure stepped into the beam. A woman. Gray coat, surgical gloves. Her eyes behind wire-framed glasses were flat. Clinical. You shouldn't be here, she said, voice devoid of panic. This area was sealed. Colter stepped forward, gun raised. Put your hands where I can see them. The woman obeyed, slowly. Her mouth curled, not into a smile, but into something colder. You ruined everything. Artemis was 2 phases from conclusion. Daniels moved to cuff her. You're under arrest for. She cut him off. No one will believe you. Not all of it. You think people want to know what their town funded? What their taxes paid for through educational grants and special collections funding? Colter's voice was stone. Try us. Behind them, Mira whimpered. The woman, Dr. Halvorsen, they later learned, was only the surface. The rot ran deeper. 3 days later, the library remained cordoned off. A crime scene hidden in plain sight. Media trucks lined the square. But Meadow Falls was a town that hated scandal. And that hate meant denial. The mayor issued a brief statement. An isolated incident. A rogue element. We are cooperating fully with federal authorities. But Clara knew better. Daniels knew better. And Shadow, he never left the hospital's side. Where Mira lay recovering, barely speaking, sketching pictures of dogs in underground rooms. One drawing caught Clara's eye. It showed Shadow, standing between Mira and a shadowy door. A caption in a child's careful hand. He didn't let them take me. 2 weeks later, the local council hosted a quiet memorial. Not for the victims. There were too many names missing. Too many families still unaware. But for the silence that finally broke. A bronze statue now stands in the courtyard outside the library, Shadow. Mid-step, ears forward, forever listening. Beneath it, a plaque reads, "To the one who barked when no one else would." Clara visits often, sometimes with Colter, sometimes with Daniels, sometimes just with Shadow. She looks out over the town, its perfect streets, its tidy lawns, and wonders how many more secrets lie beneath the surface. But Shadow? He always knows. His ears twitch, his nose lifts. He waits. Because somewhere, another door waits to be found. And when the silence is too loud to ignore, he'll bark again. Today's story wasn't just about a loyal canine dog. It was about an instinct that never stayed silent. About a bark that cut through years of silence, shaking loose secrets buried far too deep for far too long. Shadow couldn't speak in words, but he didn't need to. His loyalty, his senses, his heart, they all spoke louder than language ever could. And when the world looked the other way, when no one else could hear, he barked for those who couldn't. He growled for those who had been silenced. He waited, not just as a dog, but as a sentinel for the truth. We tend to think courage is loud. That it's about heroics in the heat of a moment, chasing danger, saving lives, making headlines. But sometimes, courage is quiet. It's the unwavering stillness before a storm. It's sitting by a closed door, day after day, because you know what's behind it matters, even if no one else does. It's trusting your instincts when others doubt, and standing firm when the world moves on. Shadow didn't act out of obedience. He acted out of purpose. And when the moment came, when it mattered most, he raised his voice. Not for himself, but for others. That's what makes him a hero. Speech balloon. Have you ever had a moment like that? When your heart whispered a truth your mind wasn't ready to accept? When something inside told you to pause, to speak up, to act, even if the world around you said no? Those moments matter, deeply, and they're more common than you might think. We'd love to hear yours. Down finger. Share your thoughts in the comments. Whether you've known a brave animal like Shadow, experienced a moment of silent knowing, or simply felt moved by today's story, your voice matters here. Your story might help someone else find theirs. Because here, on Heroic Animals, we don't just tell stories. We honor instincts. We celebrate loyalty. We believe in the quiet, unwavering bravery of animals who protect, serve, and sacrifice in ways that defy explanation. Pushpin. Don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the next incredible journey. More true stories of courage and connection are on the way. Each one a reminder that heroes don't always wear capes. Some wear collars, some walk on 4 paws, and some speak only when the silence becomes too much to bear. Paw. Shadow taught us something profound. That truth doesn't always arrive with a bang. Sometimes, it comes with a bark. That loyalty doesn't need to shout. It just needs to show up. Again and again. And that courage, real courage, might look a lot like a dog sitting patiently in front of a locked door, waiting for someone to listen. Folded hands. Thank you for being with us. Every comment, like, and share helps carry these stories further, helps keep the spirit of these animals alive in hearts across the world. So please, drop us a note below. Tell us what moved you, what you believe in, what you want to see next. Because courage has 4 legs. And truth? Sometimes, it starts with a single, defiant bark. We'll see you in the next story. Until then, stay kind, stay brave, and never stop listening.